Well, we're going to continue discussing Sand Creek soldier Irving Howbert in his account of Sand Creek and his defense of the battle at Sand Creek on November 29, 1864. And we discussed this previously in our last video and started getting into Irving Howbert's account of Sand Creek and what he said about the event. If you have not seen that video, the link to that is in the comments here on this video. So if you need to pause this video and watch that first, go click the link on the comments here and take a look at the first part about Irving Howbert. So we're going to just keep going talking about Irving Howbert today and his defense of Sand Creek and his defense of the men at Sand Creek as well. So join us today. We'll be reading from Irving Howbert's book, Memories of a Lifetime in the Pikes Peak region. And so join us and follow along as we learn from an eyewitness at Sand Creek. One of the claims that's been commonly made over the last almost 160 years about Sand Creek is that the Colorado 3rd Cavalry was made up of the worst, and they found the most horrible people they could find to fill out this group of men. And Irving Howbert gives a defense of that, and we'll be talking about that in this video today, and talking about how Sand Creek was actually a politically motivated event attacking Colonel John Chivington, according to Irving Howbert, who knew John Chivington at an early age, and that's also something we talked about in the previous video, and so you can learn about that there. But he continues on talking about his account of how he knew Chivington, as an acquaintance with him, as a friend, and he talks about Governor Evans of Colorado Territory and how he was able to get the 3rd Colorado Cavalry formed and fight back. So we'll learn about this straight from Irving Howbert in his book. But we do have an excerpt here, and we have an excerpt in our book, We Found the Lost Sand Creek Site. And this is just a short excerpt from our book, from We Found the Lost Sand Creek Site, about Irving Howbert. Howbert, highly esteemed and well accomplished, one of the 3 founding fathers of Colorado Springs. He was county clerk, state senator from El Paso County, a trustee at Colorado College, president of First National Bank in Colorado Springs, and director of the Colorado Midland Railway Company. And you can learn more about Irving Howbert also in our book, We Found the Lost Sand Creek Site, and there's a link to get our book in the description to this video. You can go straight to the link and buy our book. You can learn more about Irving Howbert and his connection to our discovery and the discovery of the lost Sand Creek site, and how Irving Howbert was instrumental in providing clues on where to search for artifacts, because that's where we come in, is telling the story of discovery and how that discovery of the real site of Black Kettle's village and battle areas tells a very different story from what we hear about the massacre claims. So let's get into Howbert's book and let's just kind of hear from Irving Howbert. So we're going to learn straight from Irving Howbert in his book, Memories of a Lifetime in the Pikes Peak region. Few events in American history have been the subject of so much misrepresentation as the Battle of Sand Creek. It has gone down into history as an indefensible massacre of peaceable Indians, and perhaps nothing that can now be said will change this erroneous impression in the world at large, notwithstanding the fact that the accusation is unjust and a libel upon the people of Colorado. Worst of all, this misrepresentation was given wide publicity through the reports of 2 congressional committees following unfair, one-sided, and prejudiced investigations. Unfortunately, at that time, Colorado was a territory and had no senators or representatives in Congress to defend the good name of its people. Its only representative being a delegate in Congress without vote, consequently without influence. To add to the bad features of the situation, our people at home realized but dimly what was taking place at Washington until after the mischief had been done. Consequently, the congressional investigations virtually went by default so far as the people of Colorado were concerned. It should be kept in mind that Colorado was at that time, comparatively speaking, more remote from the rest of the country than Alaska is today, and the means of disseminating news throughout the territory were exceedingly limited. From early November 1864 until March 1865, the coaches that carried the mail between the Missouri River towns and Denver ceased running on account of the hostility of the Indians, and all this time, Colorado was practically cut off from the rest of the world, except for limited telegraph service that did not reach any point in the territory outside of Denver. Thus, the enemies of Colonel Chivington had full sway in their efforts to blacken his reputation and that of the citizens forming the Third Colorado. I wish to emphasize the fact that a large majority of that regiment were high-class representative men. Colorado had already contributed its full quota to the army fighting the rebellion, and that without a draft having been made, but when the emergency arose caused by the defenseless condition of her settlements, numerous farmers, merchants, and professional men, many of whom would have been exempt in a case of a draft, enlisted in the Third Colorado, making that regiment a more representative organization than any that had previously been raised. It was a fact well known in Colorado that the accusations on which the various congressional and military investigations were based had their origin in the petty jealousy of military officers. It was the same kind of spirit that caused the loss of more than one battle in the Civil War. However, at Sand Creek, on account of the secrecy of preparations, the victory could not be prevented, but the good effects could be and were in a large measure nullified to the great detriment of the people of Colorado. And this was done by officers who formerly were residents of the territory and indebted to it for their official positions. But to understand fully the animus of these men, it will be necessary for the reader to know something of their history, as well as that of the other officers involved in the controversy. Colonel John M. Chivington, who was in command at the Battle of Sand Creek, and who was the principal target throughout the various investigations, was the Reverend John M. Chivington, who was in charge of the Methodist missions in Colorado at the time we arrived in 1860. He was a member of the Kansas-Nebraska Conference and had been selected for this mission work because of his unusual energy, ability, and force of character. The prominent position that the Methodist Church early assumed in the territory under his administration confirmed the wisdom of his appointment. Upon the organization of the 1st Colorado Volunteer Cavalry in the early part of 1862, Reverend Mr. Chivington resigned his position as presiding elder of the Rocky Mountain District and was commissioned major of the new regiment. He soon became the regiment's most influential officer. He was the most prominent figure in its wonderful march to New Mexico and the remarkable victories won by it over the invading Texas Confederates were largely due to his brilliant leadership. By the end of the active campaign, Major Chivington had become so popular with the officers and enlisted men that upon the resignation of John P. Slow, the colonel of the regiment, he was promoted to that position over Lieutenant Colonel Samuel F. Tappan on petition of a large majority of the commissioned officers of the regiment. This was the beginning of all his troubles, as will be seen further along in my narrative. Later, Colonel Chivington was appointed by General Canby to be the command of the military district of New Mexico and was afterward transferred to the same position in Colorado, which office he held at the time of the Battle of Sand Creek. We're going to continue on with Howbert's account in his book, Memories of a Lifetime in the Pikes Peak region. And Irving Howbert says this: the overshadowing reputation made by Colonel Chivington in the campaign against the Texas invaders of New Mexico and his subsequent promotion to the colonelcy of the regiment over Lieutenant Colonel Samuel F. Tappan, although apparently acquiesced in at that time, aroused a spirit of jealousy, envy, and antagonism against him on the part of a small group of officers headed by Lieutenant Colonel Tappan and Major E. W. Wynkoop. This antagonism manifested itself on every possible occasion. After their return from New Mexico, these officers never allowed an opportunity to pass for discrediting and injuring the preacher colonel, and after the Battle of Sand Creek, they never tired of referring to it as an evidence of his unfitness. Lieutenant Colonel Tappan had been a professional newspaper correspondent in Washington before entering the Army. Consequently, he had no trouble in filling the Eastern press with exaggerated and distorted accounts of the battle. In his crusade, he had the active support of all the Indian traders, interpreters, half-breeds, and other of similar character who congregated around an Indian agency. He also had the sympathy of the Indian Bureau at Washington, which usually took the sentimental side of every question affecting the Indians. Prior to 1864, the Indians of the plains that had been on the warpath during the summer were permitted to make peace in the fall, remain unmolested during the winter, receive annuities, and accumulate ammunition for the coming summer's raids. But in that year, the overtures of the Cheyennes and Arapahoes were rejected, except upon the condition that they submit to the military authorities. This they not only refused to do, but continued their depredations at places convenient to their winter camps, and received from Colonel Chivington's command the punishment they so richly deserved. This meant great financial loss to the traders and hangers-on around the Indian agency at Fort Lyon. Consequently, these people also actively joined in the attack upon Colonel Chivington. This crusade resulted in 2 congressional investigations of the battle and a hearing by a military commission. Before the joint special committee of the 2 houses of Congress, the principal witnesses were Major Wynkoop, Captain Sewell, Lieutenant Kramer, 2 Indian agents, 2 Indian traders, 2 half-breeds, and 1 interpreter to sustain the accusations, and only Governor Evans and 3 minor officers of the 3rd Colorado Regiment for the defense. Aside from Governor Evans and the 3 officers just mentioned, the witnesses were extremely hostile to Colonel Chivington and apparently were ready to go to any length in their testimony in order to blacken his reputation and that of the 3rd Colorado. Neither Colonel Chivington nor Colonel Shoup was present or represented in any way. In the hearing before the Committee on the Conduct of the War, Colonel Shoup was not represented and Colonel Chivington only by means of a deposition. As a result of these partial and one-sided investigations, both committees condemned Chivington and pronounced the battle as a massacre. The most unjust and absurd investigation of all was that made by a military commission which was composed of 3 officers of the 1st Colorado Cavalry, all subordinates of Colonel Chivington, headed by his inveterate enemy, Lieutenant Colonel Samuel F. Tappan. The accusation made at each hearing was that the Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians attacked by Colonel Chivington's command at Sand Creek were not only friendly to the whites, but were under the protection of the military authorities at Fort Lyon, and that the battle was, by the consent, if not by the direction, of Colonel Chivington, an indiscriminate massacre. All of this, I believe, is proved to be untrue to the satisfaction of any reasonable person by the facts related in my account of the battle and of the Indian hostilities in El Paso County, where I resided, and elsewhere throughout Colorado during the year and a half preceding this event. In corroboration of my statements as to the hostile character of the Indians punished at Sand Creek, and to show the conditions existing elsewhere in the territory previous thereto, I quote from Governor Evans' reply to the report of the Committees on the Conduct of the War, dated August 6, 1865. In the territorial days of Colorado, the governor was ex officio superintendent of Indian affairs within its boundaries. At the time of the Sand Creek battle, Honorable John Evans, formerly of Illinois, was governor of Colorado and had held that office since the spring of 1862. Governor Evans was a personal friend of President Lincoln and had been appointed governor by the latter on account of his high character, great ability, and efficiency in administrative affairs. Governor Evans' supervision of Indian affairs in Colorado during 1862, 1863, and 1864 made him a better qualified witness as to the conditions existing among the various tribes during these years than any man of that period. The following extract from his reply to that part of the report of the Committee on the Conduct of the War, which under the heading Massacre of the Cheyenne Indians refers to his responsibility in the matter, tells of the attitude of the Indians towards the whites during that period and of his own strenuous efforts to avert hostilities. Among other things, he says, the war opened early in the spring of 1864. The people of the East, absorbed in the greater interest of the rebellion, know but little of its history. Stock was stolen, ranches destroyed, houses burned, freight trains plundered, and their contents carried away or scattered upon the plains. Settlers in the frontier counties murdered, or forced to seek safety for themselves and families in blockhouses and interior towns. Immigrants to our territory were surprised in their camps. Children were slain and wives taken prisoners. Our trade and travel with the states cut off. The necessities of life were at starvation prices. The interests of the territory were being damaged to the extent of millions. Every species of atrocity and barbarity which characterizes savage warfare was committed. The records of these offices also show that, in the autumn of 1863, I was reliably advised from various sources that nearly all the Indians of the plains had formed an alliance for the purpose of going to war in the spring, and I immediately commenced my efforts to avert the imminent danger. From that time forward, by letter, by telegram, and personal representation to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the Secretary of War, the commanders of the department and district, by traveling for weeks in the wilderness of the plains, by distribution of annuities and presents, by sending notice to the Indians to leave the hostile alliance, by every means within my power. I endeavored to persevere. I endeavored to preserve peace and protect the interests of the people of the territory. I had appealed by telegraph June 14th to the War Department for authority to call the militia into the United States service or to raise 100-day troops. Also had written to our delegate in Congress to see why I got no response, and had received his reply to the effect that he could learn nothing about it, had received a notice from the department commander declining to take the responsibility of asking the militia for United States service, throwing the people entirely on the necessity of taking care of themselves. The 3rd Regiment was organized under authority from the War Department, subsequently received by telegraph, and under a subsequent proclamation issued on the 13th of August. The 3rd Regiment was organized under authority from the War Department, subsequently received by telegraph, and under a subsequent proclamation issued on the 13th of August, and was regularly mustered into the service of the United States about 3 months before the battle the committee were investigating occurred. In summing up, Governor Evans says, first, the committee, for the evident purpose of maintaining their position that these Indians had not been engaged in war, say the prisoners they held were purchased. The testimony is to the effect that they captured them. Second, the committee say that these Indians were and always had been friendly and had committed no acts of hostility or depredations. The public documents to which I refer show conclusively that they had been hostile and had committed many acts of hostility and depredation. Third, they say that I joined in sending these Indians to Fort Lyon. The published report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs and of the Indian Council show that I left them entirely in the hands of the military authorities. Fourth, they say nothing seems to have been done by the authorities to prevent hostilities. The public documents and files of the Indian Bureau and of my superintendency show constant and unremitting diligence and effort on my part to prevent hostilities and protect the people. If anything in addition to Governor Evans' statement is needed to prove the hostility of the Indians attacked at Sand Creek, it will be found in the admission of the Indians themselves made at the council held by Governor Evans with Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs in Denver about 60 days prior to the battle. At this council, there were present Black Kettle, White Antelope, head chief of the Central Band of Cheyennes, Bull Bear, leader of the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, Neva, sub-chief of the Arapahoes, and several other minor chiefs of those tribes. These chiefs admitted that their people had been and were still committing depredations, as the following extract from the report of the council, taken down at that time, conclusively shows. Governor Evans, who committed the murder of the Hungate family on Running Creek? Neva, the Arapahoes, a party of the northern band who were passing north. It was the medicine man, or Roman Nose, and 3 others. I am satisfied from the time he left a certain camp for the north that it was this party of 4 persons. Agent Whitley, that cannot be true. Governor Evans, where is Roman Nose? Neva, you ought to know better than we. You have been near her to him. Governor Evans, who killed the man and boy at the head of Cherry Creek? Neva, after consultation, Kiowas and Comanches. Governor Evans, who stole the horses and mules from Jimmy's camp 27 days ago? Neva, 14 Cheyennes and Arapahoes together. Governor Evans, what were their names? Neva, Powderface and Whirlwind, who are now in our camp, were the leaders. Colonel Shoup, I counted 20 Indians on that occasion. Governor Evans, who stole Charlie Ottoby's horses? Neva, Raven's son. Governor Evans, I suppose you acknowledge the depredations on the Little Blue as you have the prisoners then taken in your possession? White Antelope, we, the Cheyennes, took 2 prisoners west of Fort Kearny and destroyed the trains. It will be seen from the foregoing that these Indians, although pretending to be friendly, had to admit that their people stole the horses from soldiers at Jimmy's camp near Colorado City, an account of which I have already given, and that the Indians who did it were in their camp at Sand Creek at the time the council was being held. They lied concerning the man and boy killed at the head of Cherry Creek, for they knew that the Kiowas and Comanches never came this far north, and that the murders were committed by their own people. Neva's admission that Raven's son stole Charlie Ottoby's horses proved the hostility of the Arapahoes, as Raven was the head chief of that tribe. At the time the council was being held, General S.R. Curtis, commanding the military district, sent the following telegram to Colonel Shivington, evidently fearing that peace would be made prematurely. Fort Leavenworth, September 28, 1864. To Colonel Shivington, I shall require the bad Indians delivered up, restoration of equal numbers of stock, also hostages to secure. I want no peace till the Indians suffer more. Left Hand is said to be a good chief of the Arapahoes, but Big Mouth is a rascal. I fear the agent of the Indian Department will be ready to make presents too soon. It is better to chastise before giving anything but a little tobacco to talk over. No peace must be made without my direction. S.R. Curtis, Major General. On November 2, 1864, Major Wynkoop was relieved of the command at Fort Lyon, and Major Anthony of the 1st Regiment of Colorado Cavalry was appointed his successor. The reason given for the removal of Major Wynkoop was that he was inclined to temporize with the hostile Indians, contrary to the orders of his superior officers. In a report made by Major Anthony to his superior officers from Fort Lyon, under date of November 6, 1864, he says, 9 Cheyenne Indians today sent in wishing to see me. They state that 600 of that tribe are now 35 miles north of here, coming towards the post, and the 2,000 about 75 miles away, awaiting for better weather to enable them to come in. I shall not permit them to come in even as prisoners. for the reason that if I do, I shall have to subsist them upon a prisoner's rations. I shall, however, demand their arms, all stolen stock, and the perpetrators of all depredations. I am of the opinion that they will not accept this proposition, but that they will return to the Smoky Hill. They pretend that they want peace, and I think they do now, as they cannot fight during the winter, except where a small band of them can fight an unprotected train or frontier settlement. I do not think it is policy to make peace with them until all perpetrators of depredations are surrendered up to be dealt with as we may propose. This report was dated only 23 days before the Battle of Sand Creek occurred. The Indians Major Anthony mentioned as camped 35 miles away were the ones that were attacked by Colonel Shimington. That they were not and had not been under Major Anthony's protection, and that he considered them hostile, is clearly shown by the above report, as well as by the testimony given by him March 14, 1865, in an investigation of the Battle of Sand Creek made by the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, as shown by the following extracts. Did you not feel that you were bound in good faith not to attack those Indians after they had did you not feel that you were in good did you not feel that you were bound in good faith not to attack those Indians after they had surrendered to you and after they had taken up a position which you yourself had indicated? I did not consider that they had surrendered to me. I never would consent that they should surrender to me. My instructions were such that I felt in duty bound to fight them wherever I found them, provided I considered it good policy to do so. I did not consider it good policy to attack this party of Indians at Sand Creek unless I was strong enough to go on and fight the main band at the Smoky Hill River some 70 miles further. If I had had that force, I should have gone out and fought this band on Sand Creek. We're just going to pause there for a moment. And what we get from Irving Howbert from these several pages of this book is that the orders to go fight the Indians were given by General Curtis, orders that Shimington could not ignore. Shimington did not order Sand Creek, and we'll get into this in future videos, but this Colorado Third, they traveled over 200 miles on horseback in cold conditions, got frostbite, and to go fight these hostile Indians at Sand Creek, as Halbert has described and given accounts from Governor John Evans and even from Major Anthony, who was commanding officer of Fort Lyon at the time of Sand Creek. These are all from eyewitnesses. These are people that were there. We were not there, but we can only learn from those that experienced these historical events. And this is why we only take information about Sand Creek from eyewitnesses, because they were there and were able to write about it and document it. And one of the reasons we will look carefully at what Halbert had to say is because during the research that was done to discover the lost Sand Creek site, what he wrote about distances and where the village was camped and how far they were from where they first saw them from that ridge. And we talk about that in the previous video. So I encourage you to go see that. But all of his distances, everything he said turned out to be absolutely correct. And so I'm of the opinion that, he documented this, and documented this information. And these books were published, one in 1914 and one in 1925, which was years after Sand Creek. But it is clear that he documented this information before these books were published and documented the information much closer to the date of Sand Creek. And Irving Howbert gives the biggest clue of all on where to search for artifacts. Again, see that in the previous video. But we see here in this video that the Indians camped at Sand Creek was not some random attack on a village of Cheyenne and Arapaho people. This was the same Indians committing depredations that Governor Evans had warned about and asked for help to fight back. And this is all from eyewitnesses. And we see that this camp that was filled with warriors. They were filled with people that committing these hostile acts against settlers and stealing stock and taking captives and killing white settlers and scalping their enemies. This is the same group of Indians that's described there that were camped on Sand Creek. And it's important to note because we can also verify this information about these dog soldiers from a man named George Bent, who was a dog soldier. He was half Cheyenne. And in his later years, while he worked as an Indian agent in Oklahoma, there's historians that would reach out to George Bent and ask him questions by letter. They would ask him about his Cheyenne life. They would ask him about his time at Sand Creek. And he would answer their questions and talk about the days he spent at Sand Creek and the event at Sand Creek. And it's important to note that George Bent, a Cheyenne dog soldier, talks about all these raids that they went on and taking captives and scalping their enemies and all these hostile acts. And he talks about this openly to these historians. And when he answered questions about Sand Creek, he talked about that Sand Creek was a fight, a battle, an affair. And most of the time, he just referred to Sand Creek as just Sand Creek. There's a few references in his letters where he says Chivington's massacre. But it's important to note that when he's saying this, this is again years later, many years after the event, and he is now just calling it what he's been told to call it. Is this official name is Chivington's massacre, which was passed down from Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Tappan, and he is a big reason why this attack came against Colonel Chivington. Is that the events at Sand Creek turned out to be used as a political attack, and according to most eyewitnesses that were there, that this event was lied about to attack Colonel Chivington because he passed up Lieutenant Colonel Sam Tappan without any prior military experience. He went into the battle at Glorietta as major, and he had no military experience going into that. And that huge victory gave him the promotion of colonel. He skipped lieutenant colonel, went straight from major to colonel, and thus, according to Howbert and other eyewitnesses, this became a very petty attack on Chivington politically. And modern day, this event now is being used not just politically, but it's being used to destroy patriotism. It's being used to make the white soldier look as bad as possible. So when people go hear about this Sand Creek event at the National Park Service Sand Creek site, they're being told about this horrible acts that these white soldiers committed in an attempt to make them, hate their country, to hate patriotism. And it's being used in a way to destroy our white American history. And you see from eyewitnesses that actually were there. And Irving Howbert's not the only one to write about Sand Creek. There's other soldiers that also wrote about Sand Creek that defended it as a battle, adamantly defended it as a battle. And we're going to be talking about those soldiers in upcoming videos. So be on the lookout for those videos. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Give this video a like, comment below, check the link in our comments about our previous video, and see the links to our Facebook page at Bowen History on Facebook and on X at The Lost Sand Creek. You can follow us there as well. Check out our website, thelostsandcreek.com. We have over 20 pages of blogs, and we've got other videos on this page. We've got videos showing metal detecting and metal detecting Sand Creek battle areas. So be sure to look at the other videos on this channel. Look at our short films. We have a short film about the Water Valley Schoolhouse and the connection of the Water Valley town site to the Sand Creek site discovery. And there's a short film about Sand Creek soldier James Carr, and he found his friend that was killed at Sand Creek, and fellow soldier, and he writes a letter, and we have a short film about that. So look for the James Carr letter on this channel as well. But go ahead and subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, make sure you get notified when we have new videos. So we will see you in the next video.